Evan, I'd like to ask you a question, sir, and then I would like to make a comment. Do you claim any party, Democrat, Republican, Independent? And if you do, sir, where do you think we would be at now without the peacekeeping force that President Carter put into the Middle East between Egypt and Israel? In other words, the military that he sent over there to watch over these, two countries here. I think that Israel and Egypt, sir, is a big piece of the puzzle in the Middle East. And if Carter hadn't did what he did, I can just only wonder now where we would be at today, sir.
Well, I agree with you on the Egypt and Israel. Actually, it wasn't Carter. I know the story well. It goes all the way back to Ceausescu, and it was Begin and Sadat who actually put that deal together. Carter was opposed to it. He was trying to bring the Soviets into the peace process, and Sadat was opposed to that, and so wasn't Begin. But then Carter backed down and changed his tune, and he ended up taking a lot of the credit for it. Nevertheless, the Egyptian-Israel peace accord was brilliant, and it worked. Even though Carter didn't develop the plan, he did participate with it at Camp David and did a good job at Camp David, reasonably good. Yeah, I support that program totally, and I think that's something that Carter should get a lot of credit for.
Former President Carter continues to have a role or a presence in the Middle East peace discussions. Report here that world leaders push for Mideast peace. Several world leaders, including Jimmy Carter, plan to visit Israel and the West Bank in an effort to advance the peace process. The International Middle East Center said on Saturday the group will arrive today in Israel but will not visit the Gaza Strip during their trip. The center said the visit is aimed at trying to push U.S. President Barack Obama's peace policy forward and to encourage Israel and the Palestinians to advance peace and reconciliation. Are the plans of the former president or the goals in the Middle East of the former president in sync with what President Obama would like to see happen in the Middle East?
I don't think so. You know, it's interesting, the animosity between Clinton and Carter. He hasn't been in step with most of the past presidents and has created a lot of animosity with them. What does Carter's coming in under an organization called the Elders. And Bishop Tutu was supposed to come with him.
Desmond Tutu?
Yes. I don't know if he's still on the trip, but he was supposed to come with him. Carter's belief system, by the way, if you take the term elders and you go to the Jews and you say to the Jews, we want to have a peace program and we have an organization called the Elders, would you like to meet with us? They get very nervous because the great book that created most of the anti-Semitism is called The Elders of the Protocols of Zion. This was used during the Russian Tsar, during the pogroms, during the Holocaust, and it's the #1 selling book in the Muslim world outside of the Quran. It makes them very nervous because it propagates the blood libel myth, and of course that's a news story today with the Swedish journalist talking about the selling of organs by Israelis. So it's a real problem for Israel to support anything with the term elders, but his belief system is precisely the same. Hamas should be recognized. It's a terrorist organization, but Carter doesn't see it as one. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, but he doesn't see it as one. He sees it as a democratic movement that needs our support. This is a real problem. If we're fighting a war on terror, we can't do it.
Bluffton, South Carolina. Sally for Mike Evans, a Republican caller.
Yes, I just want to say, I'm sorry to say, I voted for Jimmy Carter like a lot of people did because we were voting more against Ford getting back in than for Carter. But I'm still paying for it today. And I want to thank God for someone writing this book about Jimmy Carter. I remember his presidency very well. After he turned the country into chaos and unemployment soared, he turned around like a true Democrat and taxed our unemployment. He was the first president that did that. I remember it very well. That's the better of what he did. The worst, and I hope this is in your book, I remember the interview with the reporter when the reporter asked Jimmy Carter, well, sir, do you mean that anyone coming to our borders that would be seeking political asylum, the United States would give it to them? And Jimmy hesitated, and then he said, well, yes. And that was the beginning of our downfall. Anyone who wanted the two magic words, just say political asylum, and we had to take them in. And that is when our country, the Easterners began to flood the country. Barbara Walters even did a sect on it on her 2020 program. At the time, I used to travel back and forth between New York and France. And it got so bad. When I would come through customs, they wouldn't even ask for my passport. And they would just wade me through, and I would say, how do you know I'm even an American? And they would say, just go on through, we know. And it wasn't until I saw the program that Barbara Walters did that I realized why they were letting me come through, because they had to let these people through that the customs agents themselves said were really scary.
Well, I also voted for Jimmy Carter. I remember that.
Both times?
Huh? No. The first time he ran, I voted for him because of my faith. I thought that this was going to be a wonderful president. You know, he claimed to be an evangelical, and he said all the right things. Because of my personal faith, I thought, wow, this is so great. And I was excited about his presidency. But when I saw I didn't understand it at that time. Actually, I was in Washington, D.C. with a general by the name of Dutch Hauser. And he was dying and he was crying. And he was the general that was sent by Carter to Iran to work with the military. And he told me, I caused the death of these men. He said, I lied to them. And most of the top leaders in Iran were executed, were tortured and executed. They were allies of the United States. But Hauser said, I was sent there to neutralize them, to keep them from a military coup. And he was horrified, and that upset me when I talked to General Hauser and realized some of the things that actually were the truth about the dilemma.
Viewer Laura Moon sends us a tweet via Twitter. She writes, shame on you for calling Jimmy Carter, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and an honorable man for calling him an anti-Semite. Do you think he's an anti-Semite?
Well, I don't recall calling him an anti-Semite. That's a very dangerous word to use. I don't think that Jimmy Carter is an anti-Semite. Now, I'm not going to build a case for him based upon being a Nobel Peace Prize winner, because Arafat was also who killed Leon Klinghoffer, threw him over in a wheelchair, and was responsible for the Munich massacre and over 1,100 terrorist attacks. So just because you got a Nobel Peace Prize winner doesn't put you in great stay with the world. Carter, I don't believe, is an anti-Semite, but I do believe that Carter is completely wrong about his position on the Jews and in the state of Israel, and has been on the wrong side of history on virtually everything lately.
Why did the Camp David Accords fail?
They didn't fail. How did they fail?
Well, I mean, in the long run, the vision of peace in the Middle East.
Yes. Well, I think that the fundamental premise was correct. Begin told me when he was at Camp David, he had a real problem with Carter because Carter didn't seem to understand where he was coming from. He said, I brought a list of cities in America that were named after the Bible, such as Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I said to the president, Mr. President, would the governor of Pennsylvania say that everyone can live in Bethlehem except the blacks? And he said, well, of course not. If he did, he'd be accused of racism. He said, then how can you ask me to do that? He said, ours is the original Bethlehem. And he had a real problem with Carter because Begin was saying, Begin did not agree to divide Jerusalem. He did not agree to the basic things that Carter is saying. By the way, Carter is still saying it. And Begin and even his secretary, Kadishai, who I met with recently, told me, no, we didn't agree to these things. The Camp David Accords failed because Carter was trying to solve all of the problems in the Middle East at once. He wanted a complete solution to everything at once. And Israel was the center of gravity at that time, seemingly on all of the problems. And he still thinks they're the center of gravity for all the problems. And that is not true. When you have Iran, a terrorist state, with most of the Mahdi army, Hezbollah, Hamas, there's a lot of other problems in the Middle East besides the state of Israel.